All right. All right. Perfect. All right, we'll get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm super excited to be here with Kailee Scales. Kailee, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So excited.
Yes. So I would love to hear. So we work together at Pencils of Promise, where you are the CEO, but I would love to hear a little bit about your journey to get you to Pop. Like where did you start? What has your career looked like? And how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I've had, I don't know if there are any people, I started this whole social impact career in development. So I started out as a fundraiser and I have ever since then, I've never met anybody who woke up and said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a fundraiser. Like, like our stories,
No.
our stories are a winding road, right? And so my story, is interesting. I had the background. I grew up in Queens. I grew up in an area where everyone was extremely. I grew up in New York, and in New York, you can't be in New York and not be politicized. So very early on, I understood things like how to change your community. I did a lot of volunteer work. Some of my earliest memories was conducting volunteerism. So I always had this I had a keen awareness for my community and what I was able to affect within my community. I had parents who grew up in like the 70s, 60s, and they were just like, or I don't even know, they would be mad if I got that wrong. So strike out the year.
Yeah.
When they grew up,
Yeah.
they were very like active and was a part of this whole vibe of change, like just change the world. If you want to change the world, just like change it. And so that was always like latent within that, or not even latent, that was always a part of me.
Mhm.
But I also was very talented. So um,
Obviously.
clearly, I'm an artist. So I was a singer. I
Oh.
started singing when I was like really young. Like I was in a choir at age 3 and I sang my whole life. And I studied
Wow.
classically. And so my plan was to be a famous singer and sing in jazz clubs, which I got to do, but to sing in jazz clubs. And that was like gonna be my life. I was gonna give my soul to the arts. And so
Mhm.
I went to Hampshire University. I studied music performance. Like I was all in, all the auditions.
Mhm.
Like I said, I was a jazz singer. And then, but there was always like something missing. Like I always felt like, but there's this other part of me, this other part of this nagging part of me that was like, you have to use your brain to do things to change the world. And I'm like, well, I do through my talent. But one day, in the middle of all of this, as I said, I'd always volunteered, and I started volunteering for this man who was running for Congress in Brooklyn. And that's just the way it is in New York. If you want to get involved, easy. And so he was running for Congress. He was connected to a friend of mine. And I was just kind of volunteering on his campaign and doing all kinds of things. And one day he said to me, he's like, Kylie, I think I want you to work for me full time as my fundraiser for this campaign. And I was like, first of all, I'm a singer, so you're rude. Like, no. um, Secondly, I don't know what that is. And so, and he was very clear. He's like, well, it's who you are. You are a person who
Mhm.
is able to connect with people, and you're able to take those relationships and help change and make things happen and achieve things in the world. And I was like, well, it does sound like me. um and I took a chance. I don't know why, but I took a chance and I was like, all right, well, I'll do this, see how it goes. And he was right. And and I was 20 years old. So it was really early on in my career. And
Mhm.
then we did an amazing campaign. We did lose by a very, very small margin, which was very unusual for this particular race because it was like highly contested race for an incumbent. And so, I had the bug. So I was like, oh, I
Mhm.
can do things and we can move mountains. And it was just like that fire that it struck. And so then, I needed to to find my next journey. And the candidate, his name is Barry Ford. He said, you have to go in the world and do stuff now. Like
Mhm.
now you go off and you fly. And I was like, oh, so just say I'm unemployed. And so I was I was like, trying to find out what I was going to do next. Like, what was my
Mhm.
path? What was my journey? Because again, this was very new to me. I thought I had it all planned out. All of a sudden, I got bitten by this transformation, social change, social impact bug, like hardcore, even though it was latent inside me. And so now I'm just like, what do I do? Oh my gosh. And I got a role, this weird blind interview. I don't know if they still do those, but at the time they wouldn't tell you like the org. You just had to go for the interview, and it was weird. Um,
What? I've never heard of such a thing. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
I had never heard about it, never heard it since. It might have just been this org, but they were prestigious at the time, NGO, and they just won. I don't know, whatever. The point is that I went on this interview and didn't know what to expect. I thought I was like for a temp job. And I got this role to work as an entry level fundraiser at the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And back then, that was like a big deal organization, and it raised lots of money, and it had like a telethon every weekend on Labor Day, and it was like this big deal. So I was just like, okay, yeah, all right, well, maybe he was right, maybe I'm going to keep going. And at that organization I experienced a whole different life, a whole different world of fundraising. It had all those things that working for a candidate had, like passion and urgency. And so when I worked at the organization, I focused on raising money for research for Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a terminal illness for those who are familiar with it. And the people that I worked with, and the volunteers and the committee members and things like that, they were people directly affected or had family members that were directly affected by the disease, which is quite awful to experience. And that brought this heightened level of urgency and change and fixing problems. And the people that I worked with had that level of urgency. So that just kind of further that doubled down on what I knew this career path could be. And I
Mhm.
was incredibly successful. We raised more money. I remember as an individual fundraiser, I ended up raising more money than any fundraiser had in the
Wow.
organization at that time, 50-year history. And so that was like, oh yeah, okay, let's go. And it kind of, snowballed from there.
That's amazing. Do you feel like you approach fundraising like differently than others do? I mean, you like broke all the records at muscular dystrophy. So what did you do that was maybe different than what others had done?
I did connect because I think the reason why I told about my, journey is because I think
Mhm.
that linear pathway of connecting resources to change was extremely clear to me. It was so any when I first started the organizations that I worked for, I was very closely connected to the outcome of what those resources did, of what the enthusiasm of the volunteers or the community or whomever, the corporations, like whomever I was working with. I was very connected to their ability to affect to pull that lever. And so to me, that was inextricably linked. That's all I know about what this entire world does. It pulls a very direct lever. And so when I and those organizations that were in the early days and then continued, they had urgency around their impact. It was an immediate deliverable. It was like highly necessary. I went on to work for things like the climate group, where I focus on climate change. I worked for this organization called the Mentor Foundation, where we focus on drug abuse prevention. There were so many. I worked with children and educational organizations. I worked in women's health and family planning, like things that had a real impact, like immediately that day. And people, or at least the people, believed that it did. And so that I understood that connection. And by understanding that connection, I was able to embody that impact. So when I met people, when I was introduced to people who just kind of were trying to understand how they could affect change in the world, I knew that I saw it like clear as day. And when we would have
Mhm.
conversations, when I would talk to donors at any level, at all levels, any type, I knew that what they were seeking truly and what they could do truly. And that's the way I spoke. And that's the message I bring in literally every environment that I've ever been in.
I feel like for a lot of people, that's a struggle to like effectively communicate the impact between the money and what your money can do. And it sounds like that's just something that just like is naturally in your brain. Like you don't have to try hard to like make that connection when you're talking about the work that you do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. People, I encounter this constantly, even now, even when I talk to board members and I talk to, other champions and advocates, they really struggle and they look for things that are less important than they think. They automatically look at things like ROI and data. And I'm not saying that's not important at all. And they look at things like numbers. And I'm not saying that that's not important at all, because of course it is. But I think that there's a disproportionate emphasis that we place on those as either fundraisers or as people hearing those numbers and that impact, so that it exacerbates the importance. It makes it bigger. It feeds the beast. And it's truly not the truth. The truth is that people want to feel that they are helping. They're helping the planet,
Mhm.
they're helping animals, they're helping children, they're helping with our individual health, they're helping ellipsis. People want to feel like they are helping. And that comes from understanding what needs to happen like in the world to affect change, and that also happens in being able to tell the stories of the people that they impact. Numbers are great, data is great, but people want to know that they are making a difference in this world. And the only way to really and that's an emotional need. That's an emotional, it's not a tactical need, it's not a transactional need, it's not a need that's based in data, it's a need that's based in love, really. And we're afraid of that language. We're afraid. We're like,
Mm,
no, no, no. They want to see the numbers. Or
mhm,
I want to see the numbers. And you
mhm,
don't. You don't. You want to feel the impact. You want to feel the change. You want to feel the connection. That's what you want. Because if you want numbers, you can invest in the stock market. There are other things that could give you
Yeah.
those numbers. You're not calling me for that. And you're not
Mhm,
calling any fundraiser for that. And fundraisers don't need to pretend. And it's this thing, it's like this like self-fulfilling thing that we do. It's like this feedback loop that we all create. We participate in this thing and then we make it bigger and bigger than it really is. And that's just not true. And I want people to understand the truth of why we are doing this and why we all show up and why we support each other, because we shouldn't be afraid of that. That is the truth. And we have to
mhm,
make that bigger and that other thing smaller.
Yeah, that power of and the sort of the magic of storytelling. It sounds like that's just naturally a part of the way you work. And you're right. I mean, story and that passion and that love for the mission is so much more compelling than a bunch of spreadsheets. And I'm a numbers person, so like that coming from me, like yes, the story is much more powerful than the numbers for sure. One thing that I find is just like rampant in the nonprofit sector is this scarcity mindset where we just believe that there's a limited amount of resources. We're constantly trying to do more with less. And we're just, I feel like we just tend to think so small because we fear that resources are going to run out. Now, okay, that's kind of a real thing, right? Like funding is getting harder to come by, and to a degree, that's a real thing. But I also feel like that scarcity mindset versus more of an abundance mindset, like really holds us back. And I just wonder your thoughts on that as a fundraiser, as a leader of, a prominent organization. How is scarcity mindset, or maybe not, maybe you don't have any scarcity mindset whatsoever. You probably don't, but
Um,
I was going to
I
say, like,
understand it
wait a
though.
second, who am I talking to? Yes. How have you seen that like really impact organizations, and what do you do to like not let that, take over?
Yeah, I'm not that person. Because but I understand it and I can answer your question. And
Yeah.
I think, well, first of all, I back to what I said earlier, we as you know fundraising like the world of social impact consists of those who contribute and those who are the bridge, right? And that's the fundraisers are like the bridge, then there are people and places and things that are beneficiaries, and then there's those who want to contribute. And so it's all an ecosystem. So we all contribute to that ecosystem and that environment. And so it's not an us against them. Like, it's not everybody's in a bubble. Like, it's one thing. It's an industry, if you will. And so I like to call it an ecosystem because industry sounds meh. And so when we think about the ecosystem of philanthropy, we all contribute to that experience of scarcity because it doesn't exist. Okay. So I refuse to believe that in a world where there are more billionaires than ever, in a world where I told you I started when I was 20. So I've watched numbers and gifts like, back in the day, $10,000 was a lot of money. Now, as fundraisers, we're like, that's great. That's not even a major gift in many organizations, right? So we know that scarcity isn't real. There's plenty of money to do lots of things, to consume. We talk about overconsumption. Like I said, there's unprecedented numbers of billionaires. So we know that resources are not scarce. Resources are not allocated to the places that are where it's important. So I think that when you think about that abundance mindset, what an abundance mindset does is the people within an abundance mindset are activists. They advocate for resources. They're not like, well, there's so few, so we're going to be happy for what we get, and we're going to all struggle and compete for the crumbs. We ask in an abundance mindset, we ask for the cookie. We know there's a cookie. We're not talking crumbs, right? And so we see the cookie. And so our job is not to scrounge for the crumbs, it is to advocate for our piece of the cookie. So we're not solicitors. We're not people we're not beggars. We're not, that's not what we do. We are advocates. So we have to advocate for the allocation of those abundant dollars to come to where it is important. And when you make that shift, when you're like, I'm an advocate, I know without a shadow of a doubt that all of those abundant resources belongs here. I know that. And so my job is to advocate for those resources to come here. When you make that subtle shift, your conversations are different, your outreach is different, your connectivity with those who can provide those resources are different, because you are not coming from a place of lack. You're not coming from a place of handout, may I have. You're coming from a place of, we deserve. This works. Fix this. And so when I learned very early in my career that I hold that I am the bridge between those who want to affect change and change. And that makes me very special, right? Because and that is what I offer. I offer, if you could buy, and I've said this to donors, you could go on vacation again? You could, renovate your bathroom. Like, there's a lot of things you could do. There's a lot of things you could do. Or you could transform the world. I'm giving you that opportunity. You go ahead and choose. I'm not going to judge. I'm going to judge. But you choose. You go ahead and choose what you want to do. And my job is to tell you how you're going to transform the world by allocating your vast resources to this thing. And it doesn't have to be vast. That could be $3. That could be $20, that could be $1 million. I'm going to tell you how that investment of $3 is going to help transform the world. Tell me you're not going to do that, and instead you're going to buy eggs, because that's how much they cost, anywhere between $100 and $200. So tell me that you're not going to transform the world. And that makes me an advocate. That makes me an activist. That makes me someone who is out asking for my piece, our piece of the cookie, because that's what we deserve. That's what. So anyway, that's how I think of that scarcity versus abundance mindset.
I love how you're just so casual. I'm like, that is a mic drop. Like, that is huge. I think that's so huge, because you're right. I feel like a lot of times nonprofit leaders, we see like, okay, there's this limited pool of resources and we're all like fighting to get what's in this pool. And you're like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to make the pool bigger. Like, how can we just make this pool bigger? That's a huge shift. I feel like, yeah, okay, we're done. That was all I needed. No, I'm just kidding.
But
That
it's
was a
true.
huge shift.
It is a
Yeah.
huge shift because I need us all everybody listening, I need
Yeah.
all of us to get on the same page because as I said, this ecosystem we all contribute towards. So if we're out here putting out this, please give me whatever you got left over kind of business, that's what we're gonna get. No. We are
Mhm.
changing the world. Most invaluable thing on this planet. There's nothing more
Mhm.
important than changing the world because it's broken and it's a mess, right? We can all agree to that.
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
if we all and the other thing that we have to understand, because it also gets frustrating, right? I think a lot of that scarcity mindset comes from that whole ecosystem and the feedback that we get from others, and it's frustrating. It's just like there's the no's. I always think I don't care how many no's I get. All I need is a yeah, one yes. And
Mhm.
so and we're frustrated by what we see in the world and the feeling like things are never going to change. And I go through this all the time. But I remember that this is very key. I remember that this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. We are a part of a linear thread of humanity that has gone on before us and that will go on after us. There has been progress, not maybe as much as we want, maybe not as much that will change and affect the material conditions of our everyday lives, but we cannot deny that progress happens. Sometimes it happens slowly, sometimes it happens in bursts, sometimes whatever, but evolution happens. It's inevitable. And so if we understand that we are a part of that long line, that run, that marathon of change, of evolution, of care for one another, for our environment, for animals, for everything that makes humanity human, and we are a part of that, then there is no cap. There are no
Mhm.
limits. It is nothing but blue sky and abundance because it goes on forever. And so all we have to do is show up as our authentic warrior soldier. I'm a pacifist, so let me not use that language, but as our authentic, as our authentic selves, advocate, revolutionary selves, and say, listen, we have a job to do. I need you to help us. We're all doing this job together. Let's keep moving. Let's keep doing it. No limits, zero limits.
Mm. I love that. That's so good. That's so inspiring that I just love how you mentioned like, doesn't matter how many no's you get, like one yes is all that matters. You're going to get 100 no's, you're going to get 1,000 no's, but that one yes, it's really all that matters. And I love that. And I think that will encourage someone listening who's like in the throes of getting all the no's, that it doesn't matter. Like we are on this journey and that it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Yeah, I love that. Um, in terms of in terms of being a leader in the nonprofit sector, I have found and I've heard that it can be kind of lonely along the way where, you know, you've got your board that you report to and you've got your team that reports to you and you're kind of like in this middle place, and it can feel kind of lonely. I wonder if you have experienced that and how you have sort of found yourself a community so that maybe it doesn't feel quite so lonely.
I think leadership lonely is because of the extraordinary responsibility that leadership brings.
Mhm.
I'm an oldest of three. And I remind my sisters of that every day. And so and if you're the oldest girl child, you generally, I mean, studies show that you generally have a lot of responsibility at an early age, right? Like you
Mhm.
are the caretaker, you do a lot of things.
Mhm.
And so as I've, so I'm the oldest by like 4 years, right? And so I've had a whole life of feeling responsible and in a leadership
Mhm.
position where I've had to understand the responsibility that comes with leadership. And so, as that has manifested professionally, I understand the loneliness because it is a responsibility like no other, especially if you sit at the highest level in an organization or a department or a group, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
You are the responsibility that you hold is, and especially if you take it very seriously, it can be isolating because at the end of the day you have to make decisions. If you're wise and a wise leader, you're going to make decisions on behalf of the collective, which could alienate individuals, and you have to observe what the collective needs, which doesn't really give you the opportunity always to engage on an individual level. So that contributes to loneliness because you're constantly observing the needs of the collective and making decisions based on what the collective needs. And so if you, I feel like the responsibility of leadership is lonely because you have to be able to kind of
Mhm.
sit at a different level and observe things differently. But I think the activity, the daily engagement is not lonely, especially if you're the type of leader who values humanity and people. It's not
Mhm.
lonely because you are still able to develop relationships and ask for advice to contribute to your decision making. Doesn't You don't need a CEO to give you CEO advice, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you can speak to various people and develop deep relationships in order to contribute to the decisions that you make. But I want to make sure, like, and I had to learn this, like, even as CEO of Pop, and just feeling the loneliness and realizing, oh, that's not loneliness. I feel the responsibility and I have to be a
Mm.
leader in that responsibility and I have to make decisions. And if I'm vocal about that, and if I am, if my team understands the way I approach and my vision and the way I intend to lead, they will, it won't be isolating. I don't have to isolate in order to be responsible. I have to be responsible.
Mhm.
And for
Mhm.
me, as a person who I told you is the oldest of three, I'm okay with that. For others, it can be a burden. It can be challenging. It can be something they're gifted in, but don't necessarily feel comfortable with. I think for me, I just have that extra boost of, having to
Mhm.
do it at a young age. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting distinction too, where it's like, yes, you're feeling responsible, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're feeling isolated. And I think I've gotten to experience your leadership style at Pop. I feel like it's very inclusive and it's very like, let's co-create something together. Let's work on this together. And so I can see, like, I understand that distinction where you're like, yeah, it's not necessarily isolated because you're very collaborative with the team. Has that always been your style, your leadership style, or has that something that you've sort of learned and evolved over time?
Um, I think Interesting question. Has it been so? I think I sometimes struggle with it. Like, it's something that I am very much aware of wanting to be, and really being intentional about being collaborative, because as like the oldest child with all the responsibility, I can just always, I can think that I'm always right. I can think right. I can think that my answers are the answers. Like, I don't just put it down, let me do it, like, I can do,
Yes.
right, I can have that tendency. But I also know that, and I have been that, like, in at times in my career, I have been that person and I choose roles that kind of make sure that I'm always been the leader of the team, of the room, of the whatever. And so I will put myself in those positions where I have that opportunity to be like, put it down. But I also know that that's not a sustainable way to be. You can't do that all the time. You will just be doing all the work and then you'll alienate other people. And then there you are, and you're just, and then and then this happened to me, early in my career. So I was that, like, I'll just do it. And then I resent it. Then I'm like, why the hell am I doing everything? Why am I doing all the work? And I'm like, oh, wait.
Right. This is what I wanted, I guess. Yeah.
Isolated myself and
Yeah.
I put on. And then you burn out, right? Like, it's just not a way to be. So I've learned over the years that I'm very intentional about understanding and seeing people and understanding that contributions are valid, that they sometimes take coaxing, they sometimes take, it takes a very intentional um, leadership style to be able to be collaborative, because and especially if you're a strong leader that thinks you know everything, you have to be able to understand and to tell yourself and to um, uh, elevate the contribute purposefully elevate the contributions of others, because they are very valuable. Everybody's background is different, everybody brings them to a different place, everybody's experiences lend themselves to creating strategy, change, all of those things. And are you still there?
Hey, I don't know what happened. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I stopped the recording and just went off camera.
Okay.
I figured you do that.
Yeah, it was like all of a sudden you were still talking and then your square went black and then it was gone. Um, Okay, we have an editor that will like
Yeah,
chop
sorry.
out this funky part. I would say like whatever the beginning of your last sentence was, if you even remember what that is. If not, we'll just find a natural point and cut it and move on.
What the heck was I talking about? What was the question? What was I saying?
We are talking we are talking about how you have like, oh God, I had the like words of your last sentence in my head. You've just like learned over time that you are not going to be the one to do it all. And
Oh, I think I was saying something about being collaborative and being intentional about collaboration, because yeah, I'll just start from there and close.
okay,
But
go for it. We're good.
but yes, over the years I've learned that it's important to be intentional about collaboration, because our team members have valuable and different perspectives, different backgrounds, different experiences, um, and oftentimes need to be elevated in conversations in those
Mm,
moments. They need an active leader to elevate and coax some of that from them, and it can only make the work greater. And so that much I learned not to one, overburden myself with having to do too much, and number two, acknowledging that I don't know everything, couldn't possibly. I know about being a queen, coming from Queens and being the oldest child, and if you want me to sing something, absolutely. And I have a little experience, but there are things I don't know, and it's very and that will only make me better, right? Like it'll teach me things as well. And so I think it's really important to be intentionally collaborative and to frame conversations and situations in a way that elevates the contributions of others.
yeah, I absolutely love that. Well, my final question is one that I ask all of our guests, but what does a prosperous nonprofit look like to you?
I think a prosperous nonprofit is an organization that has a very clear message, a very clear intervention, and has found its tribe. So, a lot of what I was saying earlier was about having this abundance mindset and ensuring that we're not limiting ourselves and our abilities to engage those who want to support the work. I talked about getting no's a lot and things like that. And I think one of the things, and I talked about, that it only takes one yes. And what I mean by that is it doesn't just take one yes, it does take a few yeses. But what I mean by that, which will create a prosperous organization, is there are people who experience the same passion for whatever it is that we are trying to accomplish in this world, whatever it is we're trying to get done. As organizations, there are people, the world is huge, there are people who want the same thing, and we have to find those people, we have to rally those people. When I think of that activist and advocate words, those terms. And so, and we have to mobilize those people and make those people feel a part of the solution. And a prosperous organization is able to effectively do that. They're able to be very clear in what it is that they are doing to change the world, to transform, to intervene. And they're able to speak, to find their tribe, to speak to that tribe consistently and in a way that connects them very deeply to the change and through the journey, and takes them through the journey to that change. And those people will be there for you. They will contribute to your cause. They will introduce you to other people. They will step up in leadership. They will be you because they will feel what you feel. They will experience what you experience. They will know what you know. I think all of us, if we are fully invested, which I think you have to be in the work that we do, we know things about the way this world works. We know things about the impact that change can make. We experience that many times firsthand. We meet the beneficiaries. We understand the power of human connection. And we know the truth, which is we are all here. We're here to take care of each other. That's why we were all put on this planet. And so, not to consume, but to give and to thrive together. And we get to experience that. And we can't talk about it and expect people to be in that tribe with us. We can't send you an email about it and expect people to be in that tribe with us. We have to bring you in on that journey. We have to give you that same experience. And so a prosperous organization knows how to do that very, very, very well. And they do that in all parts. Their leadership does it. The words that they choose do it. Everyone isn't able to be in presence with our beneficiaries and hear stories firsthand. So we're able to communicate from their perspective. That's what a prosperous organization is able to do. They're able to communicate from the perspective of the beneficiaries. In essence, they're able to connect people, things, transformation, change. And they're able to do that effectively. And then they develop a tribe. And that tribe rides with them and brings, as I said, new people. That tribe leaves you money after they're gone. They continue to support you even after they're gone. Their children, they become legacy. Their children contribute. They bring other people into the fold. They will speak, if they have platforms, they use their platform to also advocate. And so that's what a prosperous and you do that forever, because as I said, it's a marathon. And you get better and better and better, and you adapt and change to the environment and to the current culture of the world, and you communicate differently. You always revisit that, and that's what a prosperous organization is able to accomplish.
I love that. It really all stems from that message, from that story that we are telling, and that connection to the change that is possible. So I love that. So, thank you so much. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Kailee. I really appreciate you. And for anybody listening, if you want to check out what Kailee is doing over at Pencils of Promise, your website's pencilsofpromise.org, right?
Yep.
I think so. Yeah. Feel free to check that out and support what they're doing over there. And again, Kailee, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure. Bye.